Have you ever scrolled through Instagram or TikTok and felt a pit in your stomach? You know the feeling. You're watching some 23-year-old crypto expert giving a tour of their Miami penthouse while you're sitting there doing mental gymnastics trying to figure out if you can afford extra guacamole at Chipotle without overdrafting your checking account. It feels like everyone around you is secretly getting rich, making huge moves and building empires, while you're just trying to survive until Friday. Well, take a deep breath, because today I am going to show you the actual, hard data. We are going to look at the cold, hard numbers of what Americans actually have in the bank. Not the fake internet money, not the leased cars, the real net worth. We're going to break down exactly where you stand compared to the average American, the top 10%, and the ultra-elite top 1% at every single age decade. And I analyze the psychology of money, wealth disparities, and why some people build generational fortunes while others spend their entire lives on a financial hamster wheel. If you are tired of the financial anxiety and want the honest truth about where you stand, so you can actually build a roadmap to get where you want to be, hit that subscribe button. Let's dive in. Before we look at the numbers, we need to address the elephant in the room. Why does a six-figure salary suddenly feel like minimum wage? If you make $100,000 a year today, you are statistically in the upper middle class, but I guarantee you don't feel rich. Why? Because of something called invisible wealth versus visible debt. When you drive down the street, you see a brand new $90,000 Range Rover. What you don't see is the $1,400 monthly car payment and the suffocating credit card debt keeping the driver awake at 3 a.m. Wealth is what you don't see. Wealth is the money not spent. It's the index fund sitting quietly in the background. It's the paid-off mortgage. When you compare your behind-the-scenes financial struggles to everyone else's highlight reel, you will always feel behind. So let's strip away the highlight reel. Let's look at the actual data. Let's start with your 20s. If you are in your 20s, I have some great news and some terrible news. The terrible news is that you are probably broke. The great news is practically everyone else your age is completely broke too. According to Federal Reserve data, the median net worth for Americans under 30 is roughly $8,000. Yes, you heard that right. Not $80,000. $8,000. For the vast majority of people, their 20s are an absolute financial bloodbath. You're graduating with an average of $30,000 to $40,000 in student loan debt. You're landing entry-level jobs that barely cover your rent. You're trying to furnish an apartment, buy groceries, and maybe go out with your friends once in a while. But what about the top tier? To be in the top 10% of net worth in your 20s, you need about $130,000. To be in the top 1% in your 20s, you need a net worth of around $500,000. Now, how the heck does a 26-year-old have $500,000? Usually, it's one of three things: generational wealth and inheritances. They got incredibly lucky with an early startup exit or massive stock options in tech. Or they lived completely debt-free, lived with their parents, and invested 70% of a high-earning income starting at age 22. If you only have $5,000 to your name at age 27, you are perfectly normal. Do not panic. Your 20s are not about accumulating massive wealth. They are about building the shovel you will use to dig for gold later. Your shovel is your career, your skills, and avoiding catastrophic consumer debt. Now we enter your 30s. This is where the math gets ruthless and the wealth gap absolutely explodes. I call this decade the Great Divergence. In your 30s, the financial choices you made in your 20s come home to roost. The people who delayed gratification, invested consistently, and kept their expenses low start pulling away from the pack. The people who financed cars they couldn't afford and ran up credit cards start drowning. For Americans in their 30s, the median net worth jumps to roughly $90,000. That's a big jump from $8,000. Why?
Usually, it's because people start buying homes. A massive chunk of that $90,000 is tied up in home equity, not liquid cash in the bank account. But let's look at the high achievers. To be in the top 10% in your 30s, you need a net worth of about $450,000. To hit the top 1% in your 30s, you need a staggering $1.8 million. Let's talk about that top 10% number, $450,000. By your mid-30s, compound interest is finally starting to wake up. If you started putting $500 a month into an S&P 500 index fund at age 22, by age 35, you don't just have the money you saved. You have tens of thousands of dollars in pure growth. This is the decade where your money gets a job and starts working alongside you. However, your 30s are also incredibly dangerous. This is the decade of the lifestyle creep. You finally get that promotion. You're making $90K or $110K. So what do? You upgrade the apartment. You buy the luxury SUV. You start taking trips to Tulum. Suddenly, you're making double what you did at 24, but you have the exact same amount left over at the end of the month. Zero. If you want to pull ahead in your 30s, you have to fight the urge to look rich so you can actually be rich. Welcome to your 40s, the prime earning years. At this point, the financial momentum is either pushing you up a mountain or dragging you off a cliff. The median net worth for Americans in their 40s is about $168,000. Notice something scary here? From your 20s to your 30s, the median net worth grew by over 10x, but from your 30s to your 40s, it didn't even double.
Why does wealth building stall out for the average American in their 40s? One word: kids. Childcare costs, bigger houses and better school districts, minivans and college funds absolutely obliterate the average family's ability to save. The median American is surviving, paying down a mortgage, but their liquid investments are flatlining. But remember the great divergence? Let's look at the wealthy in their 40s. To be in the top 10% in your 40s, you need roughly $1.1 million. To be in the top 1%, you need $4.9 million. Let's focus on that top 10% number. This is where we see the millionaire next door. Most people hit their first million around age 49. The math here is magical. If you have $500,000 invested at age 40 and you just let it sit there earning an average 8% return, it will double to $1 million by age 49, even if you don't add another penny to it. Your investments are now making more money in a year than you did at your first full-time job. Your portfolio might jump by $60,000 or $80,000 in a good market year. The people who reach this level in their 40s aren't usually crypto billionaires or lottery winners. They are boring. They are accountants, middle managers, and plumbers who bought a house at 30, maxed out their 401ks, drove a Honda Civic for 12 years, and let time do the heavy lifting. Finally, we enter your 50s and 60s, the twilight of your traditional working years. The scoreboard is lighting up, and the game is almost over. For Americans in their 50s, the median net worth is roughly $270,000. By their 60s, it peaks at about $397,000. I want you to think about that $397,000 for a second. That is the peak wealth for the average American. If you follow the traditional financial advice, go to school, get a normal job, and do what everyone else does, you will retire with less than $400,000, and a massive chunk of that is tied up in your house. If you try to live off the 4% rule with a liquid portfolio of $200,000, that gives you $8,000 a year to live on. Combine that with Social Security, and it is going to be a very, very tight retirement. Now, let's look at the other side of the tracks. To be in the top 10% in your 50s, you need $2.1 million. In your 60s, the top 10% sits at $3.1 million. And the top 1%? In your 50s, $9.7 million. In your 60s, $12.5 million. The gap between the median and the top 10% is astronomical. This happens because the wealthy have assets that compound exponentially. Stocks, real estate portfolios, and business equity don't just grow, they multiply. While the middle class is relying purely on their physical labor to trade time for money, the wealthy have shifted completely. They no longer work for money. Their money works for them. When you have $3 million generating a 7% return, you're making over $200,000 a year while you're playing golf, sleeping, or watching Netflix. The wealth machine is self-sustaining. So why am I telling you all this? Is it to depress you, to make you feel like you're impossibly behind? Absolutely not. I am showing you this data to break the illusion. The next time you see a 24-year-old on TikTok bragging about their 7-figure net worth, you now know that they represent less than 0.1% of the population. They are an anomaly. They are the financial equivalent of a 7-foot-tall NBA player. You are not behind just because you aren't a millionaire at 30. But this data is also a warning. The default path, doing what the average person does, leads to a median net worth of $397,000 at retirement. The default path leads to financial stress. If you want to end up in that top 10% or top 5%, you have to actively choose to be abnormal. You have to budget when your friends are swiping credit cards. You have to invest in boring index funds when your friends are gambling on meme coins. You have to drive an older car when your coworkers are leasing luxury sedans. Wealth isn't about what you make. It is entirely about what you keep and how long you let it grow. Whether you're 25 with negative net worth or 45 trying to catch up, the rules of the game are the same. Start today. Buy assets, avoid bad debt, let time do the rest. If you found this breakdown helpful and you want to stop playing the financial guessing game, hit that like button. It really helps the channel out. Subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the psychology of money. Let me know in the comments below, which decade's numbers surprised you the most? Until next time, keep your expenses low, keep your investments high, and I'll see you in the next video.